Hello everyone, Ember here, and welcome back to a new video. So in this one, I'd like to talk about the expanded format, which should be bringing a bunch of new formats with it additionally to the Pokemon TCG Live client. Now, hopefully this is supposed to be releasing in 2026. According to the dev team, now, I'm not going to say that, this won't happen, but they've really not made any major announcements about this but recently as of recording this video. So, I'm not super optimistic that it is happening in 2026, but, I am willing to put, doubts aside and just fingers crossed hope that it's actually going to be happening this year. But if not, if, it is just early next year or something, then that's not, a major problem. It would just be preferable if it was sooner rather than later, because we've been waiting for a while for Expanded. And, I do agree with players that think that, Pokemon TCG Live should not have been released without all formats included. But yeah, bit of a shame that Expanded isn't already on TCG Live. So, just to kick off things, what is Expanded? Expanded is the cards that have rotated out standard legal play, including standard legal cards, effectively, from the current set all the way back to the black and white era of the game. So, effectively, what that means, all the sets that released in the black and white era, all the sets that released in XY, Sun and Moon, Sword and Shield, Scarlet and Violet, and now Mega Evolution are all legal in Expanded. Now, the caveat and the big problem here is that the current TCG Live Expanded only extends to Sun and Moon. So XY sets and black and white sets are missing right now, which is a pretty big deal because, as we'll see with some staples for Expanded, XY and black and white introduced a lot of really powerful cards to the game to really shake it up from the legacy era. This was the modern era of card design, basically, or the new era, I guess you could say. Yeah, they've changed around the border design and whatever for Scarlet and Violet, but black and white was the new era, if you will, of card design. So yeah, there's a lot of really powerful cards that they printed. Honestly, they went crazy in XY. They went really crazy with card design. But yeah, so those sets are now missing. Getting back on topic here, meaning many potential decks and combos are also missing from the format. So entire mechanics are missing. I did make a video, I think it was last year, talking about all the missing mechanics from Expanded, including these Pokemon Break here, which you see on the right, which are single prize Pokemon that give another single prize Pokemon a new attack, HP, or ability, which is really cool. So you could effectively give a Pokemon just an additional ability or an attack, which I think is sick because there's just so many cards that just they're kind of cool, I guess, but it would be nice if they had a bit more oomph. So being able to just evolve your Ninetales into a Ninetales Break is just really cool in my opinion. So that's nice to see. Also, the old Mega Evolution mechanics, things like ancient traits. But if you want a big more of a full recap, I guess be sure to go watch that video, of course. But yeah, that's just a rough overview of what's missing. However, at least two more formats are made possible with Expanded, which we'll talk about in this video. And that's kind of the second half of this video. The first half is really talking about Expanded itself. Second half is all right, there's actually other formats that are made possible by Expanded existing, which is really cool. But if you have any format suggestions that I'll include in this video, let me know which are your favorites down in the comments and which you would like to see added to TCG Live. But yeah, as for any concerns for Expanded, which we do have to talk about first, Expanded's range of cards is impressive, but the obvious downside is combos that were not designed to be possible. That's just a thing, they were designed to be across several sets and then they would rotate out. So Expanded lets you use all the crazy things. It's not as crazy as Unlimited or Eternal, for example, where all the cards that have been ever been printed are legal, which is ridiculous and obviously very, very broken. But it's not as crazy as that, but it is still pretty, aggressive and crazy. So this basically just creates a load of aggressive and control decks. So combo heavy pieces, crazy decks that take a lot of skill to play, but also are, can be a little bit toxic sometimes to play against. And a noteworthy problem with this is that new or younger players might find the format daunting with the floodgates open to insane combos, and that could put new players off giving the format a proper chance, basically, if they find themselves overwhelmed. And of course, you can make this argument for Standard as well, but I think Standard is slightly less polarizing because it has, obviously, standard legal tournaments. There's a lot of content being made for it online. You can attend your local league challenge to learn more about Standard, things like that, basically. Whereas with Expanded, it's kind of you could just throw a pile together, click on the new format, and then you'll just get absolutely walloped by some crazy Expanded combo. So, I think that could be a little bit daunting for new players. However, I don't think this would affect the format's survivability all that much, really. But yeah, one further point, just very quickly, is that a noticeable portion of the community is not supporting expanded because of decks that are often prominent, such as Reggie Drago or Mill. You see a lot of comments on YouTube videos being like, okay, there's tons of Reggie Drago or like control in this tournament. Seems a bit rough, seems a bit aggressive. But I think like it will require like players giving it a proper go, a proper chance, a fair chance, if you will, to like form a good opinion on it. And like I would always recommend with these things, like if you're on the fence about trying something, definitely give it a go. Don't be like, oh well, I'm going to write it off because I really don't like Reggie Drago. But like if you've never played Reggie Drago and Expanded, you might love it. There might be something cool there. And Expanded is also like more than just one Japanese tournament every year. It's so many different possible decks. So I think that's worth bearing in mind, basically. But yeah, I don't think that would affect the format survivability too much because Expanded already has like an established player base, of course. So that could help bring and educate like new players into the format, which could be cool. So yeah, just moving on though, we have Expanded itself as the first of the three formats. Pretty self-explanatory, Expanded has to be included here. Yeah, the main staples really talk about Via Seeker and N, both very important cards for the format, and just being like the original Iono / Marnie, which is just a very good card. Via Seeker, phenomenal. I mean, retrieve a supporter card from a discard pile is a crazy effect on an item. So yeah, XY was just bonkers, to be honest. Battle Compressor also just a very good card, synergizes well with Via Seeker and many combo decks as well. So yeah, very cool pieces. You could argue that Double Dragon G is a bit of a staple. I think it's mainly because there's like a lot of really prominent dragon decks usually in Expanded. So that's why Double Dragon G gets brought up. Think back to what was that Ultra Necrozma Silent Lab deck that used to see play a lot? Stuff like that, But like I don't think Double Dragon G is as much of a staple as it used to be, but still a very strong card and probably something that could have like a reprint at some point in the future once Dragapult is rotated, of course. But yeah, still a very strong card. Next up, though, is I do want to talk about some of the other formats that would be made possible with Expanded, and that is, of course, GLC. So at a glance, what is GLC if you don't know? It's a singleton format, so you're only allowed one copy of every card, except for Basic Energy. It is still 60 cards, but you're only allowed one type in your deck, and no rule boxes are allowed. So you pick one type, and it's only single prize Pokemon, effectively. So if you want to build a Wailord deck, then you can only play water Pokemon in that deck. So that's basically the rules of GLC. So, like, why play GLC? Well, I think it's a more balanced Pokemon TCG format with access to make your favorite Pokemon work in a more forgiving format and environment, with plenty of strategies and comeback potential. And, of course, no two games are alike because the deck variety is very diverse. Like, yeah, in GLC, there's like a couple of decks that are noticeably defined as being like the better lists, but the format is often changing a lot, and some of like the best attackers in GLC are ones from more recent sets. Like Meganium is a phenomenal card. Guzzlord was fairly recent in the Sun and Moon era. Okidogi, very new card. Wailord from Journey Together, very new card again. So the format is like constantly changing and evolving, even though no cards in it rotate. But having access to GLC is kind of annoying right now because it's limited to IRL, or like you can do it online, but you have to do it over like webcam and stuff, and it's just very awkward. So like it'd be much better if there was a feature that let you basically just play GLC against friends. Now you can't really do that right now, even in like trainer trial settings, because for some reason you can't challenge your friends, if that makes sense. Or you can't challenge your friends to battles in Expanded, which doesn't make any sense to me. Like that should be a feature that was available from day one, but it's not for some reason. So like when they add Expanded, they should definitely add that. It's like a really big piece of this video, really. But yeah, if they add that, then that means players could create GLC decks basically within the Expanded format and then challenge friends, and you could create GLC tournaments for TCG Live, which is very cool. It's also just a very cheap format. Now, this is more relevant to like IRL games less than TCG Live, but GLC is just cheap and can be made even cheaper with substitutes. So if you're not like super familiar with the format, but you're like putting together a pretty good deck on Live, then you could like recreate it for pretty cheap IRL. So that could be really fun as well. And of course, this could get more people into GLC IRL. That is another point to make here. And it's not mentioned in the PowerPoint, but should be mentioned is that, this could help more players get into the format. So, just a very cool format, I would say, overall. Next up, though, is we have the theme deck format. I've really, really been wanting to talk about this one for a while again. So what is themed? Well, it's a pre-constructed starter decks that were released from the legacy era of the game. So that's pre-Black and White, actually, into Sword and Shield. And there were 2 per set. So, for example, like you just take any set from like that era of the game. So like XY Fates Collide, for example, there was 2 theme decks in that set. I got both of them, so that's why I named it Fates Collide. But yeah, they were fun to collect back in the day. Like they were not very good, but they were fun to collect. So Pokemon TCG Line, the old client for the game, for all you old people out there, featured a theme deck format where you could battle players with a theme deck, and not mentioned here, but there was also a tournament structure as well. So you could actually battle people in a tournament. They have kind of added a tournament recently to TCG Live in the way of like pre-release battles, but this was kind of like a stage-by-stage tournament, and you got rewards depending on how well you placed, basically. So it's a very simple user face as well, very accessible, easy to use, very, very fun, made for some really fun content as well. But yeah, designed as starter decks, they featured a roughly 20-20-20 split of often around bulk or lower powered Pokemon and trainers. And they were also pre-constructed, which is a key term here because it means you can't change or tweak the deck. But however, the inconsistency and pre-constructed nature made this format super unique in my opinion and interesting, with no 2 games being alike, because you're being forced into a corner where every decision is really important. Like you could make the same argument for GLC, for example, but I think it's even more important in theme deck format because like energy acceleration is really rare. You know, things like Hurricane Charge and Roaring Resolve are very powerful. Then also attacks accelerate energy can be really good. Some Pokemon that wouldn't see the life of day in like a standard, expanded, or even GLC get a chance to actually shine in this format, which is really cool. And because it's pre-constructed, there's already deck lists out there. Like they have already been released online effectively. So it would be very easy to like put together a theme deck format, I think, for TCG Live. Like, yeah, you'd probably have to do this because I know that they've kind of said that the GLC format might be added to Pokemon TCG Live at some point anyway. It's its own independent format, which would be helpful. But they've not really, said anything for theme decks. So like theme decks could definitely come back as its own thing. Like I don't think they would ever bring theme decks back IRL, sadly. I think they're just long gone in the past and probably for the better. They weren't really a great way of getting new players into winning games. But at the same time, I do think like they were just a great introduction format on TCGO, and I think they would be great basically for TCG Live. And you could definitely host tournaments, of course, as I said before, with the pre-constructed list online, and you could make more as well for new sets if you really wanted to. So just something fun I thought was worth mentioning. As for any other format ideas, like the CU Cup would be my number one shout. It's a trainer trial format that was common and uncommon only. Very, very fun, to be honest. I did a CU Cup deck ideas video back when like the trainer trial was in effect. So if you want to check that out, I would recommend it. Silver Series is also pretty cool, a trainer trial format that was max rarity holo rare. So if you want to do something a bit more creative, then that could be really fun. There's also a 1 generation only format idea floating around a bit online, which I thought was cool. So Pokemon all must be from 1 generation, so that could be really interesting. Like, yeah, you might end up with stuff like Dragapult to Dunsparce, but wait, I think Dragapult to Dunsparce same generation? There might be, actually. I can't remember, it's been a while. Wait, no, Dunsparce is Scarlet and Violet, surely. Yeah, I'm probably just straight up lying to you guys. Oh, my bad. Anyway, 1 generation only. So say you wanted to build a Charizard deck. So like you could do Charizard, Rapidash, Ninetales, just an example. So, stuff like that basically. Also things like self-contained cubes. So 1 or 2 sets are legal to force unique deck creation and could also limit the trainer pool a bit. Could be interesting. Maybe something like early Sun and Moon X and Y and like other retro formats. So XY plus Sun and Moon I think could be really, really fun. Those early days of Sun and Moon, like basically just the pre-tag team and Zoroark era, were really, really cool. So I could definitely see that format being very appealing, actually. I could definitely see that one being popular. Also, like the Triple B format, which I've also done a video on recently, like that for general single prize use, could also include break Pokemon factoring into the evolutions. Could be interesting. But yeah, which format are you most looking forward to? Are you looking forward to GLC? Would you try out theme deck format if it existed? I've also got one more format idea, which I think I'll just save for another video at this point. But yeah, let me know what you think down below. And yeah, thank you for watching.